Kash Patel sat quietly in the green room of the bustling television studio. He wasn't used to being in places like this. Bright lights, loud voices, and people rushing around everywhere. Normally, he spent his days in labs or offices, working on projects that were far removed from the public eye. But today was different. Today, he had been asked to come on to The View, one of the most popular daytime talk shows in America. They wanted him to talk about space exploration and new technologies. Kash didn't want to do it at first. He was a scientist, not someone who liked to be in front of cameras. Talking to strangers made him uncomfortable, especially when they asked too many questions. But his boss had insisted. "This is good PR," she said. "It'll help people understand what we're doing out there." So here he was, sitting in a chair that felt too small for him, waiting for his turn to go on stage. He looked down, at his hands. They were steady, but inside Kash felt nervous. He knew why they really wanted him on the show. It wasn't just about sharing updates on rockets or satellites. There had been rumors lately, big ones. People were saying strange things about Jupiter's moon Europa. Some claimed scientists had found proof of life. Others said it was aliens. Kash didn't know exactly what was true, but he did know that his work was connected to all of it, and now everyone expected him to explain everything. Just then, a young woman popped her head into the green room. She had short blonde hair and wore a headset with a microphone attached. "Mr. Patel," she said cheerfully. "We're ready for you." Kash nodded and stood up. His legs felt stiff, like they belonged to someone else. As he followed the woman down the hallway, he could hear the muffled sound of applause coming from the main studio. The noise grew louder as they approached the heavy double doors leading to the set. When the doors opened, Kash stepped through and blinked against the bright lights. The stage was huge, much bigger than he'd imagined. In front of him sat 4 women at a long table. Their names flashed across the bottom of the screen behind them: Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, and Meghan McCain. Behind them, rows of people filled the audience seats, smiling and clapping politely. One of the producers guided Kash to his seat at the end of the table. He adjusted his tie awkwardly as he sat down. The hosts greeted him warmly, introducing themselves and welcoming him to the show. Kash tried to smile back, but it came out more like a grimace. "So, Kash," Whoopi began once the introductions were over, "we hear you've been working on some pretty exciting stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?" Kash cleared his throat. This was the easy part, the rehearsed answer he'd prepared earlier. "Well, I work for a private aerospace company," he said slowly. "Our goal is to develop new technologies that can help us explore space more efficiently." Joy leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "That sounds amazing. What kind of technologies are we talking about?" Kash hesitated. He couldn't give away too much. Most of his work was classified, after all. "Things like advanced propulsion systems," he replied carefully, "and tools that let us study distant planets and moons in greater detail." Sunny chimed in next. "Speaking of moons, there have been some interesting reports lately about Europa. Have you heard about those?" Kash froze for a split second. He hadn't expected them to bring that up so soon. "I've seen the reports," he admitted cautiously. Meghan raised an eyebrow. "Do you think there's any truth to them? You know, the idea that there might be, well, life out there?" The room seemed to grow quieter. Even the audience stopped fidgeting. Kash could feel their eyes on him, waiting for his response. He glanced at the hosts, searching for a way out of this line of questioning. But there wasn't one. Everyone wanted answers, and he was supposed to have them. "I can't say for sure," Kash said finally. "But Europa is definitely one of the places where conditions might support life. That's why we're studying it so closely." Whoopi nodded thoughtfully. "It's fascinating, isn't it? The idea that we might not be alone in the universe." Before Kash could respond, Joy jumped in with another question. "What about these rumors we've been hearing? People are saying your team has discovered something big. Is that true?" Kash shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He hated how persistent they were. Back in the lab, No one ever pushed him like this. Here, though, it felt like every word he said would be dissected and analyzed. There's always ongoing research, he said evasively, but I can't comment on specific findings. The audience murmured softly, sensing that Kash was holding something back. Sunny noticed it too. Come on, Kash, she teased. You must have some juicy details for us. Kash forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow even to his own ears. He wished he could leave right then and there, but he couldn't, not without causing a scene. Instead, he focused on keeping his composure, hoping the segment would end soon. Meanwhile, in a nearby office building, Rachel Dawson watched the broadcast unfold on her computer screen. She was a journalist known for her sharp investigative skills, and she'd been following the Europa story for weeks. Something about it didn't add up. Why were officials staying so quiet, and why had Kash Patel suddenly appeared on national TV? Rachel scribbled notes furiously as she listened to the conversation. She noticed how Kash avoided answering directly whenever the topic of Europa came up. It was almost as if he were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Whatever he knew, it had to be important. Across town, Daniel Harper sat glued to his laptop, streaming the same interview. Unlike Rachel, Daniel wasn't a trained journalist. He was a conspiracy theorist with a loyal online following. To him, Kash's appearance on The View was proof that the government was hiding something massive. They're testing him, Daniel muttered to himself, seeing how much he'll spill before they shut him down. As the minutes ticked by, the tension on screen continued to build. The hosts kept pressing Kash for more information, but he remained tight-lipped. Then, just as it seemed like the interview might wrap up without incident, Megan leaned in closer. Let me ask you one last thing, Kash, she said earnestly. If you could tell the world one thing about what's happening out there, what would it be? For a moment, Kash didn't move. He stared at the camera, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. They're already here. The words hung in the air like smoke. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire studio seemed frozen in time. And then, without warning, Kash stood up and walked off the set. The audience gasped. The hosts exchanged shocked glances. Someone shouted, "Security!" But Kash was already gone, disappearing behind the curtain like a ghost. Back in her office, Rachel stared at the screen in stunned silence. Her mind raced with possibilities. Had Kash just confirmed the existence of extraterrestrial life? Or was there more to his cryptic statement? Daniel, meanwhile, erupted into action. He grabbed his phone and started recording a video for his followers. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed. "Kash Patel just blew the lid off everything. This changes everything." As chaos erupted both on and off the screen, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The moment Kash Patel walked off the set of The View, pandemonium erupted. At first, no one knew how to react. The four hosts sat stunned, exchanging glances that ranged from confusion to outright panic. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back in her chair, shaking her head slightly, while Joy Behar stammered, "What just happened?" Sunny Hostin looked like she wanted to chase after Kash but stayed seated instead. Meghan McCain simply stared at the empty chair he had vacated, her jaw hanging open. In the audience, people began murmuring loudly. Some stood up, craning their necks to see if Kash would reappear. Others pulled out their phones to record the chaos or text friends about what they'd just witnessed. Social media feeds were already lighting up with reactions. Within seconds, clips of Kash's abrupt departure flooded platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Hashtags like Tom Kash Patel and "In There Already" here started trending worldwide. Behind the scenes, security guards scrambled to figure out where Kash had gone. They pushed through the heavy double doors leading backstage, shouting into their radios for backup. But by the time they reached the hallway, Kash was nowhere to be found. He had slipped away so quickly it was as though he'd vanished into thin air. Back on the set, the producers tried to regain control of the situation. A stage manager rushed over to the hosts, whispering urgently into their ears. "We need to cut to commercial," he hissed. But before they could act, one of the audience members shouted, "What did he mean? Are aliens real?" That single question sent another wave of murmurs rippling through the crowd. People began speculating wildly, throwing out theories ranging from government cover-ups to alien invasions. The energy in the room shifted from surprise to excitement and fear. On the other side of the country, Rachel Dawson sat frozen at her desk, still staring at her computer screen. She hadn't blinked since Kash uttered those 5 words. "They're already here." Her heart raced as she replayed the clip over and over again. What did he mean? Was it metaphorical? Or was he confirming something far more extraordinary? Rachel grabbed her notebook and jotted down every detail she could remember from the interview. She circled the phrase Europa repeatedly, underlining it until the page nearly tore. Whatever Kash knew, it had to be connected to the mysterious signals coming from Jupiter's icy moon. She remembered reading reports about strange patterns detected by deep space probes near Europa. Scientists had dismissed them as natural phenomena, but now she wasn't so sure. Her phone buzzed insistently on the desk beside her. It was her editor calling. Rachel hesitated before answering. She didn't have enough information yet to write a full article, but she knew this story was too big to ignore. When she finally picked up, her editor wasted no time getting to the point. "Rachel, I saw the clip," he said breathlessly. "Do you think it's legit? Do we have a lead on this?" "I don't know yet," Rachel admitted, "but I'm working on it. Give me a few hours." Across town, Daniel Harper was having the time of his life. His YouTube channel, which usually attracted niche audiences interested in UFO sightings and conspiracy theories, was blowing up. Thousands of notifications poured in as viewers flocked to watch his latest video titled, "Breaking: Kash Patel Confirms Alien Contact." Daniel paced back and forth in his cluttered apartment, talking animatedly into his webcam. "Ladies and gentlemen, I told you this day would come," he exclaimed. "Kash Patel didn't just walk off that show because he got nervous. He walked off because he knows the truth, and they won't let him tell us." He paused dramatically, leaning closer to the camera. "Think about it. Why else would they send security after him? They're trying to silence him before he reveals everything. This isn't just about Europa anymore. This is about contact. Real contact." His viewers ate it up. Comments flew in by the hundreds, praising Daniel for being ahead of the curve. Some even claimed to have seen similar behavior from whistleblowers in the past. One commenter wrote, "This proves it. The government has been hiding aliens for decades." While Daniel basked in his newfound fame, federal agents descended upon the View studio. They arrived in unmarked cars, wearing dark suits and carrying badges. Their presence only added fuel to the fire. Reporters swarmed outside the building, desperate for any scrap of information. Inside, the staff was interrogated relentlessly. Everyone who had interacted with Kash, even briefly, was questioned. Did he say anything unusual before the show? One agent asked the makeup artist who had prepped Kash earlier. "No," she replied nervously. "He seemed normal. Quiet, maybe, but not weird." Another agent turned his attention to the producer who had booked Kash for the appearance. "Why did you invite him? Did anyone pressure you to get him on the show?" The producer shook her head vigorously. "It was all standard procedure. We thought he'd talk about space tech. Nobody mentioned anything about aliens." Despite their efforts, the agents came up empty-handed. Kash had left no trace behind. There were no fingerprints, no dropped belongings, nothing to indicate where he might have gone. Whoever Kash Patel was, he clearly knew how to disappear when he needed to. Meanwhile, Rachel decided to dig deeper into Kash's background. Using her journalist credentials, she accessed public records and academic databases. She discovered that Kash had spent years working for a private aerospace corporation called Stellar Horizons. The company specialized in cutting-edge research funded primarily by government contracts. Its projects often involved classified work, making it difficult to find concrete details. One name kept popping up in connection with Kash: Dr. Emily Grant. According to old news articles, Emily had once been a rising star in the field of astrobiology. She had co-authored several papers with Kash during their time at Stellar Horizons. However, her career had taken a sudden turn 6 years ago when she abruptly resigned without explanation. Since then, she had vanished from the scientific community entirely. Rachel's instincts told her Emily Grant was key to understanding what Kash meant on the show. If anyone could shed light on his cryptic statement, it was her. But finding Emily wouldn't be easy. She had effectively erased herself from public life, leaving behind almost no digital footprint. As Rachel continued her investigation, Daniel pursued his own lead. Scrolling through archived interviews and lectures featuring Kash, he stumbled upon a clue. In a presentation given at a science conference years earlier, Kash had mentioned a remote observatory in Arizona. He described it as a place where groundbreaking discoveries happen away from prying eyes. Daniel immediately recognized the significance. Observatories were often used to analyze data collected by space probes. If Kash had referenced this particular location publicly, it likely held some importance to his work. Without hesitation, Daniel packed a bag and booked the next flight to Arizona. He didn't care if he was chasing shadows. He was determined to find Kash Patel and uncover the truth. Unbeknownst to both Rachel and Daniel, Kash wasn't running from authorities. Far from it. As he drove away from New York City in a rented car, his mind remained focused on one goal: reaching Emily Grant. He believed she was the only person who could help him make sense of the message they had intercepted from Europa. The signal wasn't random noise, it was structured, deliberate, and it suggested something unimaginable. "They're watching us," Kash muttered to himself as he gripped the steering wheel tightly. "They've been watching us for centuries." He glanced at the map on his phone, pinpointing the location of Emily's last known address. It was a cabin tucked deep in the mountains of Colorado. Getting there wouldn't be easy, but Kash didn't have a choice. Time was running out, and humanity deserved to know the truth, even if it terrified them. As night fell, the world remained abuzz with speculation. News outlets aired endless segments dissecting Kash's words. Social media users debated whether aliens were friendly or hostile. Governments issued vague statements denying knowledge of extraterrestrial contact. Yet amidst all the noise, 3 individuals, Rachel, Daniel, and Kash, were quietly converging on answers that could change everything. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a signal continued to pulse faintly, waiting for humanity to respond. Rachel Dawson arrived at the remote observatory just after sunset. The drive had been long and lonely, winding through desolate desert roads until she reached the crumbling structure perched on a hilltop. It looked exactly like the photos she'd seen online, old, forgotten, and eerily quiet. She parked her car outside and stepped out, gripping a small flashlight in one hand and her notebook in the other. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of dry earth. As Rachel approached the building, she noticed how overgrown the area was. Weeds sprouted between cracks in the pavement, and vines clung stubbornly to the brick walls. The metal sign above the entrance read, "Arizona Sky Observatory," in faded letters. It hadn't been used in years, according to public records, but Rachel suspected otherwise. She pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly as it swung inward. Inside, the observatory was dark and dusty. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting pale beams across the floor. Equipment lay scattered around, telescopes covered in tarps, shelves lined with outdated textbooks, and desks cluttered, with papers yellowed by time. Despite its disrepair, the place still held an aura of importance, as though great discoveries had once been made here. Rachel moved cautiously, her footsteps echoing softly against the tiled floor. She spotted a desk tucked into a corner, partially hidden behind stacks of old folders. On top of the desk sat an ancient laptop, its power cord dangling loosely from the wall socket. Curious, Rachel flipped the switch, half expecting nothing to happen. To her surprise, the screen flickered to life, displaying a login prompt. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, trying common passwords like password and admin. After several failed attempts, she pulled out a USB drive loaded with basic hacking tools. It wasn't her area of expertise, but she'd picked up a few tricks over the years. Within minutes, the laptop unlocked, revealing a desktop filled with encrypted files. Rachel opened the first file and began decrypting it. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, slowly transforming into readable text. From what she could tell, these were logs detailing observations made by deep space probes orbiting Europa. There were numbers, charts, and notes scribbled hastily by whoever had worked here last. But one phrase caught her eye repeatedly. Non-random pattern detected. Before she could process what that meant, the sound of footsteps startled her. She spun around, her heart pounding, only to see Daniel Harper standing in the doorway, breathing heavily. His flashlight beam swept across the room, briefly blinding her. "What are you doing here?" Rachel demanded, clutching the edge of the desk. Daniel lowered the flashlight, his expression a mix of irritation and triumph. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied. "You're not the only one chasing Kash Patel." Rachel frowned, unsure whether to trust him. Daniel's reputation preceded him. He was known for wild theories and unreliable sources. Still, they both wanted answers, and working together might get them there faster. "I'm trying to figure out what Kash knows," Rachel said finally. "This laptop has files related to Europa. If we can decode them, maybe we'll understand why he walked off that show." Daniel nodded eagerly and stepped closer. "Let me help. I've got some experience with this kind of stuff." Together, they worked through the night, decrypting file after file. Each new discovery added pieces to the puzzle. The data showed clear evidence of structured signals emanating from Europa, patterns too complex to be natural. Notes written by Dr. Emily Grant hinted at attempts to translate the signals, though progress had been slow and frustrating. As dawn approached, they stumbled upon something extraordinary, a partial translation of the signal. It wasn't complete, but enough. Fragments existed to piece together a message. The language was unlike anything human, yet somehow familiar, as if designed to resonate with universal concepts. "They're trying to communicate," Rachel whispered, staring at the screen. "But why? And what do they want?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes wide with excitement. "It's confirmation. Aliens are real, and they've been reaching out to us. This changes everything." Rachel shook her head. "We don't know that yet. The message isn't finished. For all we know, it could be a warning, or worse." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant rumble of engines. They exchanged worried glances before rushing to the window. Two black SUVs sped up the dirt road leading to the observatory, kicking up clouds of dust. Federal agents spilled out, armed and wearing tactical gear. "They found us," Daniel hissed, panic creeping into his voice. "We need to leave, now." Rachel hesitated, glancing back at the laptop. They couldn't abandon their findings, not when they were so close to understanding the truth. But staying would mean risking arrest, or worse. "We'll take the laptop," she decided quickly, unplugging it and shoving it into her bag. "Move quietly. Stick to the shadows." They slipped out the back door just as the agent stormed the front. Crouching low, they darted across the rocky terrain, heading toward Rachel's car parked on the far side of the hill. The SUV's headlights scanned the area, illuminating patches of ground as the agents fanned out in search of intruders. Breathing hard, Rachel and Daniel reached the vehicle without being spotted. She slid behind the wheel while Daniel jumped into the passenger seat. With tires squealing, they sped away, leaving the observatory and the agents behind. Neither spoke for several miles, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Where are we going now?" Rachel gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing. "Emily Grant," she said firmly. "If anyone can finish translating that message, it's her. Kash is looking for her too. We need to find her before he does, or before the government does." Daniel nodded, determination replacing his earlier fear. "Then let's hope she hasn't disappeared completely." Unbeknownst to them, Kash Patel was already closing in on Emily's location. He had followed clues buried deep within Stellar Horizons archives, encrypted emails, coded messages, and coordinates pointing to a secluded cabin in Colorado. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but he pressed on, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. "They're watching us," Kash murmured again, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. And they're waiting. Hours later, Rachel and Daniel arrived in Colorado, guided by vague leads and hunches. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks shrouded in mist. Somewhere among the trees, Emily Grant awaited them, and perhaps the key to humanity's future. As the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the trio unknowingly converged on the same destination. Each carried their own motivations, fears, and hopes. What they would find in the mountains remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The answers they sought would change the course of history forever. The journey to Emily Grant's cabin had been long and exhausting, but finally they were there. Rachel Dawson parked her car at the edge of a narrow dirt road, hidden from view by thick pine trees. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the earthy scent of damp leaves. As she stepped out of the vehicle, she felt a chill run down her spine, not just from the cold mountain breeze, but from the weight of what they might find inside that cabin. Daniel Harper followed closely behind, his flashlight bouncing erratically as he scanned the area. "This has to be it," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Look at the address on the mailbox. It matches the coordinates." Rachel nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She adjusted the strap of her bag, which held the laptop containing the partially translated message. Every step closer to the cabin felt like walking deeper into uncharted territory. They didn't know if Emily would welcome them or even trust them, but they also knew she was their best chance at understanding the signal from Europa. Kash Patel arrived moments later, parking his own car farther up the road. He emerged silently, his face unreadable under the dim light of dawn. For days he had been chasing leads, piecing together fragments of information that pointed him here. Now, standing before the cabin, he felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because he was close to finding answers. Dread because he wasn't sure humanity was ready for them. Without speaking, the three converged near the cabin's front porch. The wooden structure looked weathered but sturdy, its windows glowing faintly with candlelight. Someone was definitely home. "We should knock," Rachel suggested hesitantly. "She might not respond well if we barge in." Daniel rolled his eyes. "Knocking won't work. If she's been hiding this long, she's probably paranoid. We need to convince her we're not threats." Kash raised a hand, silencing both of them. "Let me talk to her," he said firmly. "She knows me. If anyone can get her to listen, it's me." Before Rachel or Daniel could argue, Kash approached the door and knocked gently. The sound echoed softly in the stillness of the forest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the curtain over one of the windows shifted slightly, revealing a pair of cautious eyes peering out. "Emily?" Kash called out, keeping his tone calm and steady. "It's Kash, I need to speak with you." There was another pause, longer this time. Finally, the door creaked open just wide enough for a woman to step into view. She was older than Rachel, expected, with graying hair tied back in a loose bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that darted between the three visitors. "What are you doing here, Kash?" Emily asked sharply. Her voice carried a hint of suspicion, though she didn't seem entirely surprised to see him. "I need your help," Kash replied. "We've decoded part of the message from Europa. You're the only one who can finish it." Emily's expression hardened. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, glancing past Kash at Rachel and Daniel. "And you certainly shouldn't have brought strangers." Rachel stepped forward, holding up the laptop. "Please, Dr. Grant, we aren't here to cause trouble. We just want to understand what the signal means. It's important for all of us." For a moment, Emily hesitated. She studied their faces carefully, searching for sincerity. Whatever she saw must have reassured her, because she sighed heavily and opened the door wider. "Come in," she said reluctantly. "But keep your voices down. We don't want any interruptions." Inside, the cabin was cozy yet cluttered. Books and papers covered nearly every surface, stacked precariously on shelves and tables. A small fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Emily gestured for them to sit at a round table near the window, where a half-empty cup of tea sat cooling. Once they were settled, Kash explained everything. The rumors about Europa, his appearance on The View, and the frantic race to uncover the truth. Emily listened intently, her brow furrowing as he spoke. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples thoughtfully. "You shouldn't have involved civilians," she said, nodding toward Rachel and Daniel. "This isn't something ordinary people should meddle in." "It's too late for that," Kash countered. "The world already knows something's happening. Keeping it secret won't stop them from finding out." Emily gave him a piercing look. "Do you realize what you've done? By speaking publicly, you've accelerated things. They'll act now before we're ready." "Who will act?" Rachel interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. "Are you talking about aliens? Or someone else?" Emily hesitated, then reached for a folder tucked beneath a pile of books. Inside were printed documents filled with diagrams, equations, and handwritten notes. She spread them across the table, pointing to sections marked with red ink. "The signal isn't random," she began. "It's a map, a set of instructions leading to a specific location on Earth, specifically Area 51. Daniel's eyes widened. Area 51? Like the military base? Why would aliens send directions to a top-secret government facility? "Because it's not just a base," Emily explained. "Decades ago, we intercepted something, an object. At first, we thought it was debris from a meteorite. But when we analyzed it, we realized it wasn't natural. It contained technology far beyond our understanding." Rachel leaned forward, her heart racing. "Are you saying the government has been hiding alien artifacts all this time?" Emily nodded grimly. "Yes. And the signal from Europa? It's telling us how to activate it." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Kash stared at the papers, his mind racing. If that's true, then whoever controls the artifact controls unimaginable power. That's why they've kept it hidden. "But why now?" Rachel asked. "Why send the signal after all these years?" Emily shrugged. "Maybe they decided we're finally advanced enough to handle it. Or maybe they're testing us, to see if we're worthy of joining some kind of interstellar society." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "Or maybe it's a trap. What if activating the artifact triggers something dangerous?" No one had an answer to that. The uncertainty hung heavy in the air, pressing down on all of them. After a long moment, Kash broke the silence. "We need to go there, to Area 51. If the instructions lead somewhere, we have to follow them." Emily frowned. "It won't be easy. The place is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Even if we manage to get close, there's no guarantee we'll succeed." "We don't have a choice," Kash insisted. "If we don't do this, someone else will, and we can't let that happen." Rachel glanced at Daniel, who nodded in agreement. Despite the risks, they couldn't turn back now, not when they were so close to uncovering the truth. Emily sighed again, clearly torn. Finally, she stood up and walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of the room. Unlocking it, she pulled out a small device that looked like a cross between a compass and a smartphone. "Take this," she said, handing it to Kash. "It'll guide you to the exact spot, but be careful, whoever's guarding that artifact won't hesitate to stop you." With that, the decision was made. The four of them spent the next hour planning their approach. They agreed to split up temporarily. Emily would stay behind to monitor communications and provide backup, while Kash, Rachel, and Daniel traveled to Nevada. Time was running out, and they needed to move quickly. As they prepared to leave, Emily stopped Kash at the door. "Promise me one thing," she said quietly. "Whatever happens, don't trust anyone. Not even those claiming to be allies. This goes deeper than you think." Kash nodded solemnly. "I promise." With that, they stepped out into the crisp mountain air, the sun rising higher in the sky. Ahead lay challenges none of them could fully anticipate, but they pressed on, driven by a shared determination to uncover the secrets buried beneath the desert sands. Unbeknownst to them, forces far greater than they imagined were already converging on Area 51. Humanity stood on the brink of discovery, and perhaps destruction. The journey to Area 51 was anything but easy. Kash Patel, Rachel Dawson, and Daniel Harper, drove through endless stretches of barren desert under the blazing sun. The air inside the car grew stifling as they neared their destination, but none of them complained. They were too focused on what lay ahead, and the risks they were about to take. As dusk fell, they parked their vehicle several miles away from the restricted zone, hiding it behind a cluster of rocks. From there, they continued on foot, guided by the small device Emily had given Kash. It emitted soft pulses of light, pointing them toward the exact location of the artifact buried beneath the desert sands. "This feels like something out of a movie," Daniel muttered nervously as they trudged across the uneven terrain. "Are we really doing this?" Rachel glanced at him sharply. "We didn't come all this way to back out now." Kash said nothing, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He could see faint outlines of fences and guard towers in the distance lit up by floodlights. Security patrols roamed the perimeter, their movements methodical and precise. Getting past them would require both luck and skill. They waited until nightfall before making their move. Using shadows cast by dunes and abandoned equipment, they crept closer to the heart of the facility. Every step felt heavier than the last, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. At one point, they froze when a patrol jeep drove past, its headlights sweeping dangerously close to their hiding spot. Once the coast was clear, they pressed on, finally reaching the coordinates indicated by the device. To their surprise, the area looked unremarkable, a flat expanse of sand surrounded by barbed wire fencing. But when Kash activated the device again, it began emitting a high-pitched tone that grew louder with each passing second. "It's here," he whispered, crouching down to examine the ground. Sure enough, there was a faint outline beneath the surface, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. An entrance. Without hesitation, they started digging, using their hands and whatever tools they'd brought along. The work was grueling, but adrenaline kept them going. After nearly an hour, they uncovered a metal hatch embedded in the earth. It was old but sturdy, covered in dust and rust. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. "What do you think is down there?" "Only one way to find out," Kash replied grimly, gripping the edge of the hatch. With effort, he pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading into darkness. One by one, they descended, their footsteps echoing softly in the confined space. The air smelled stale, tinged with the scent of metal and decay. At the bottom, they found themselves in a cavernous chamber filled with strange machinery. In the center stood the artifact, a towering crystalline structure pulsating with faint blue light. Rachel approached it cautiously, her breath catching in her throat. "It's beautiful," she murmured, reaching out instinctively. Before she could touch it, Kash grabbed her arm. "Don't," he warned. "We don't know what it does." Instead, he pulled out the device Emily had given him and held it up to the artifact. Immediately, the room came alive with sound and light. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing intricate circuits and glowing symbols. A low hum filled the chamber, growing steadily louder. Suddenly, a voice echoed around them, not in English, but in a language none of them recognized, yet somehow they understood it perfectly. "Welcome, children of Earth," the voice intoned. "You have proven yourselves capable of curiosity and courage. Now we shall meet face to face." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Alarms blared in the distance, signaling the arrival of military forces alerted by the disturbance. Soldiers stormed into the chamber, weapons drawn. "Freeze!" one of them shouted. "Step away from the object." But Kash ignored the command, his attention fixed on the artifact. The hum grew deafening, and a blinding beam of light shot upward, piercing through the ceiling and into the night sky. Outside, the massive spacecraft descended silently, casting an otherworldly glow over the desert. Panic erupted among the soldiers, who scrambled to retreat. Kash, Rachel, and Daniel shielded their eyes as the ship hovered above them, its sheer size dwarfing everything else. Then, with a soft hiss, a ramp extended downward, and a figure emerged. It wasn't human, at least not entirely. Its form shimmered like liquid silver, constantly shifting and reforming. Eyes that glowed with inner light regarded them calmly, radiating intelligence and power. Despite its alien appearance, it exuded a sense of peace rather than hostility. "You have reached out to us," the being said, telepathically, addressing them directly. "Now you must decide your path. Will you join the stars or remain bound to your world?" Rachel stepped forward hesitantly. "Why now?" she asked. "Why reveal yourselves after so long?" The being tilted its head, considering her question. "Your species has reached a crossroads. Your actions determine whether you ascend or falter. We are here to guide, not to interfere." Kash clenched, his fists overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening. "What happens next?" "That depends on you," the being replied. "Will you embrace unity or division, cooperation or conflict? The choice is yours." Behind them, the military regrouped, preparing to attack. But before they could act, the being raised a hand, creating a barrier of energy that stopped them in their tracks. "No harm will come to those who seek understanding," it declared firmly. Turning back to Kash, Rachel, and Daniel, it added, "Time is short. Share what you have learned and choose wisely." With that, the being returned to the ship, which ascended gracefully into the sky. The artifact dimmed, its glow fading until only silence remained. Around them, chaos reigned as soldiers secured the area, shouting orders and confiscating equipment. Kash turned to Rachel and Daniel, his expression resolute. "We need to tell the world about this, no more secrets." Rachel nodded, clutching the laptop tightly. "If we don't, someone else will twist the truth." Daniel grinned, despite the danger. "Let's make sure humanity gets the message, loud and clear." Together they slipped away into the night, carrying the weight of their discovery and the hope that humanity would rise to meet the challenges ahead.